Morning, everyone. I am going to share today some information that will be helpful for you to complete your digital measures for your role in Create Better Health for our fiscal year 2020, which ran from October 1st, 2019 through September 30th, 2020 of this past year. So you can see on the screen here, there's two different categories of information I'll talk about today. I'll walk you through the steps that counties need to obtain a few pieces of information directly from PEARS for completing your digital measures. And then also I'll talk a little bit about the things that I will be providing to you hopefully within the next week or so. So for what I hope for this year will be the most efficient for the counties as well as for our office is that the counties will be able to obtain their own direct education reach, the direct education reach demographics and the breakdowns that we need to report in digital measures, the number of partnerships, and then also optional for you is to pull some of the qualitative data from PEARS in the form of success stories to kind of bring to life the numbers that will be reported as well. The things that we'll be providing from our state office is we will provide you with impact data from direct education. So in digital measures, you'll see these in categories such as the number of participants that gain knowledge or apply skills. And it really just depends on what kind of data I have from each of the counties as to what you'll be receiving from me. So the best data I can give you is if there's a decent number of matched pre and post surveys from series of participants. So if I have a good amount of people who I can match together, I'll send you the percent improvements in the behavior changes that we evaluate on. If I don't have enough people who are matched, which is fairly common in most years because we know participant attrition is a problem and it's hard to keep people for a face-to-face series throughout the course of the lessons. So if I don't have enough matched pre and post surveys, I'll send you group mean data, which will show most of our questions are on a 5-point Likert scale. So we look at the group mean of your pre-surveys and then compare it to the group mean of our post surveys and hopefully see an increase in those scores for most of our questions. I also have parent surveys that are completed by parents or guardians of youth who participate in our youth surveys. So I have those based on county, so I'll send you data from those. And then also on our post surveys at the end of a series, we do ask our adult participants to rate the course content and the instructor effectiveness, which I know is something they do ask in digital measures. So I'll give you the average scores for that for all of your educators if you have multiple educators. And then obviously it's up to you if you want to include that in digital measures, given that it's not your teaching that is being evaluated, but it is that of your educators that you supervise. So that's the direct education data that I will be sending to you, hopefully in this next week or so. And then also I will send policy systems and environment data. So for each of your counties, I'll send you the total sites that were worked at and the types of sites they were. So whether they were food pantries or schools or stores or community gardens. I'll send you the total estimated reach, the total changes adopted, so the total number of policy systems or environment changes that were adopted as a result of the work that your educator did with the organization, and then also the top changes in each category. I'll send in all of these, if there's any limitations to the data or any information that I feel like you should know so that you're transparent in your reporting, I'll be sure to include that. For example, in some of our PSE entries, our educators did not report an estimated reach or it is truly an estimated reach just based on visual observation. So I'll send you any of that information you need just to be sure that your reporting is very clear in how the numbers were obtained and what they are reporting on. And then optional by request, I can send indirect education reach. So We can send you your total views or impressions on your Facebook pages if that's something that would be helpful. I'm not including it as a default option just because I didn't really see a very clear place in digital measures to report that. But if you feel like that's a really important part of your programming that you would like to include, then reach out to me and we can pull that data for you. And then obviously there's some other indirect activities that occur, farmers market booths. This year our online classes that did not get any survey responses are reported as indirect activities. So if there are specific things like that that you feel are an important part to your county's story, reach out to me and I'm happy to pull that, but I'm just not going to do it for everybody unless it is requested. I'm going to switch to PEARS here to go back to the section about the information that I'm asking the counties to obtain for themselves. The top three items you're seeing here in the list, the direct education reach, the demographics, and the partnerships, are all easily pulled from one spot in PEARS. So I'm going to go ahead and stop this share and go over to PEARS. Okay, so this is the PEARS homepage. So when you log into PEARS, this is what you will see. And what you're going to use for your demographics and your reach is you're going to go to the Analyze function and you're going to go down here to EARS data. You can obtain some different information in your impact dashboard or your unit snapshot, but for the sake of this training, to keep it short, I'm just going to go into the EARS data, which is what you'll need for digital measures. You'll want to make sure that you select the reporting year that you're hoping to collect your data for. So the PEARS system will always default to the current reporting year. And when we're in here for last year's data, we'll just have to select the previous reporting year. Units, you will just go ahead and select your unit. I'm going to just pull Millard County. It may be the only one that is in your drop-down menu, but if not, just go ahead and select your county. Utah County, be careful. You can either pull, if there's a Utah category with state or Utah with a county. Just be sure you pull your county numbers. Method, here there's different options this year because of the COVID-19 impact. So I'm going to ask, I would suggest that you just keep this as the default option of estimate unique reach for item 5. It's not something you're necessarily going to be using for your digital measures, so I probably wouldn't select anything other than that. There is an option for having COVID-19 impacts reported, but again, item 5 is not really anything we're going to use for this. So I would recommend just leaving it as the default for estimate unique reach for item 5. And that's just in comparison to a duplicated reach. So obviously we want to report unique reach, just individual people we reach with our education. Even if we reach that person multiple times, we only want to count them once in our reporting. Do not select include incomplete records. You only want records that your ambassador has verified as complete for the year. And here, session start date and end date, you don't have to include anything because we do want to see the entire reporting year. If you were interested in seeing just a month of time or a couple of months of time throughout the year, you could go ahead and filter by this option here. And you'll hit Run Report and it will just open in a new tab in your browser. So you'll want to just make sure you have the correct reporting year here and the correct unit or the correct county here. So this second item, item 2, just note this is just direct education. So remember I said I will send you the estimated reach for your PSE activities. So item 2 is just those that were reached with direct education. This could be online or it could be face-to-face. You know, this year was the first year we really reached multiple people by online education, but they would be included here under direct education. You can see here, these are the categories we have to report on, which are, it's a little bit unfortunate because it is different than what is required or requested in digital measures as far as the categories. All of the information we need to determine those categories for the digital measures is here. It just takes a little bit of simple math that I'll walk you through in just a minute. But here you can see it's broken down. This is the age and the female and male categories. Something to note here, actual count and estimated count. What that refers to is actual count is an option that your ambassador can select when they're reporting their reach as to how they obtained that information. So actual count is either through surveys or self-reported data by the participants themselves, or maybe they ask the teacher in the class to tell them the breakdown of their class for males and females. So it's actual and accurate count of these demographic categories of age and gender. Estimated count is still the number of people should be accurate, but the ambassador did not have a, the participants didn't necessarily self-report on their age and their gender. So the ambassador maybe estimated it just by visual observation or by estimating that classrooms tend to be about 50-50 males and females. So the total numbers is what you want here. Again, estimated does not refer to the total number of participants. It refers to the demographic breakdown of those participants. So this total column can be a trusted column for an accurate count of the number of different ages and genders reached with direct education only. And then the next one, item 3, direct education. So this is ethnicity and race of those who were reached by direct education. So these two tables together will give you the data that you need for your digital measures. Let's see, again, we have the actual versus estimated count. So it's not an estimated number, it's an estimated ethnicity and race based on generally visual observation. And these numbers should total pretty close to your total number of participants if you add them up. If there is a slight discrepancy, it could be a race or an ethnicity that was not identified by either the participant or the ambassador. So that would be the result of any discrepancies in the totals there. The other thing you might be interested in here is programming details. So this is, again, direct education only, not policy systems and environment work. The number of single sessions. So this is classes that were one-time events. And then this is the number, the length of time that the ambassador selected for those lessons. Series of 2 to 4 sessions, series of 5 to 9, and series of 10 or more. And this is just refers to the total number of series delivered. If you were interested in the total number of classes as part of those series, you would total up these columns over here, the number of sessions. Session refers to the number of classes or lessons within a series. Item 5 is not something you'll really be using. This kind of pulls together all of the data from all of our other program activities that are not direct education. So it's our PSE work, our indirect activities, social marketing, all get captured in this table here. But the way that it pulls, it doesn't really make it very useful for county reporting because you can't break out those different pieces, which I think is important. So this is here if you're interested in how your ambassadors applied the different interventions we have. So for those of you who are newer to the program, we like to have comprehensive programming. So we like to see our interventions used in multiple program areas. But again, this is something that just may be interesting for you, but not something that is necessarily useful for digital measures. The other item you're going to pull from here is partnerships. So you can get your total number of partnerships at the bottom here, and this is just as accurate as the report that your ambassadors put into PEARS. What I like about this table is that it does include all of the different categories. So you can look through here and see if there's any zeros that you think shouldn't be there. So that would just reflect that your ambassador forgot to enter one of their partnerships, which is really fairly common. So for example, if you know your organization worked with 3 food banks or pantries, but you only see 1 marked here, you could go back and just make sure your ambassador updates it for this current year. So you can get this total number, but I would encourage you to look through and make sure that you feel everything is reflected. That should be. And if it's not in your reporting, you can, you don't have to just take this number. You can say there were 17 reported and just make sure you can justify where the difference is from this table versus your reporting, if anyone were to ask. So that's the main thing you're going to need from PEARS is this table. I'm going to Switch screens again to show you how you can use the data given to you from this table to fill out the categories in digital measures. Okay, so I will send out these instructions, but as you know, in digital measures, whether you're in extension events and activities or your major program or anywhere you're reporting your reach, the categories are you know, female white adult, female white youth, male Hispanic or Latino adult, etc. So it's not something that is pulled easily from our PEARS reporting system. So what you can do is, like I mentioned, you do have everything you need to determine these numbers, but it does take just a little bit of easy math to determine them. So what I would recommend doing is, remember item 2 in PEARS included the ages and the genders of the participants of direct education. So you know your total number, and you will just determine the percent youth and percent adults from that table, as well as your percent female and your percent males. And then using item 3 in your PEARS report, you'll determine the percent Hispanic and non-Hispanic participants, and then determine the percent of each race in the options. So here are the 5 options. And then you'll use these percentages to estimate most of your digital measure demographic needs. A couple of things that digital measures does ask for, but they are not required. We don't have the ability to poll like people who selected more than one race as one option. So that one you would just have to leave blank. And you could just, if anyone were to ask, these are reporting the primary race reported by the participants. But here's an example using some sample data. So I just did a really simple example of if your program reach was 100 individuals and 75 of those individuals were youth and 25 were adults. So you know you have 75% youth, 25% adults. The next thing you would determine is your percent males and females. So here again, I just used some fake numbers that total 100 for ease of calculation, and determined 65% female, 35% males, and determined my percentages for ethnicities and race. So for the question about female white adult, what I would do is, I know I reached 65 females, and I know 25% of them were adults, so that would be 16 adult females. I can go one step further to look at the total number of those females that were white. I have 16 adult females, which I just calculated above here, and I know from this percentage that I calculated, 84% of our participants was white. So 84% of those females are white, or which would equal 14 females. Same thing with female white youth. So again, up here, I determined I had 65 females, and I know 75% of them are youth, which would be a total of 49 females. If I have 49 youth females, and again, 84% are white, I'd have 41 female white. So what you can do is you just go through and you calculate each category that you need. And then at the end, what I would just recommend is just make sure your totals actually total your total number of individuals. And it should. This is how I've done my digital measures now for a couple of years, and I always come out to the correct total. So you can go ahead and apply this equation. I apologize that it's kind of clunky, but the way we are required to report PEARS to FNS and DWS is how it's built into PEARS, which is just a little bit different than how we're required to report in digital measures. So it does take this extra step. I'm happy to help if you need. I can walk you through it, but I will send these instructions out with this recording. Okay, and I'm going to go back up here, and the last thing that we're asking counties to obtain is success stories. So remember, your direct education reach, demographics, and partnerships can all be pulled from that EARS data form that I just showed you how to pull from PEARS. And then the other thing is success stories, which you can also pull directly from PEARS pretty easily. Okay, so I'm going to close out the data. the EARS form and go back to my Analyze and go back to Success Stories. Again, over here, you're going to want to filter the correct year. Users, you don't have to put anybody there, and just choose your county. I'm just going to choose Millard again. And you always want to hit apply here at the bottom, or else your filters won't be applied. So when you get to Success Stories, this little icon here identifies that there's a picture included, which is nice. So you can click on those, and you can just read through the story and select the ones that you want. Background is just obviously some content. The story narrative, this is the bulk of the success story. So this is often what will be shared. Sometimes they're, you know, a few sentences, and sometimes they're lengthier like this one. And then the favorite quote is identified from the ambassador. So you can go through and just choose which success stories, if you would like that part of the qualitative data for your programming for 2020. There's not a great way to filter them if you're looking for, like, you can look by program area. So if you know you want something that is associated, oh, no, that's not, I thought the program areas were under there, but they're not. So you could look by, let's see, approaches. This is what I was thinking. Individual or group-based nutrition education, or PSE work. You could filter them this way. But generally, counties don't have a ton to look through, so I would just recommend scrolling through and seeing which ones you want. So that's really what you will need for your digital measures for this year. I will do another training on impact dashboards and unit snapshots. So there's a lot of information you can gain from there. They are really great spots to look through the year at what is happening in your programming and what is happening in reporting. Because I think, you know, one really important message here is at the county level, the supervisors really know, you know, more so than we know, what's happening on a week-to-week basis. And PEARS and our reporting is only as good as what your ambassadors enter, you know, and it's really pretty impossible for us to know if your ambassadors are or are not entering things. So I'd really encourage you to be in here, you know, maybe just once a month, once every couple of months, to see what's going on and make sure your ambassador is reporting all of the great work that they're doing. So again, I'll do another training on these sections, but I wanted to keep this one relatively brief for what you would need for your digital measures for this year. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to help with anything. If there's more specific information you would like, I'm also happy to gather that for you. Okay, thanks everyone. Have a great day.